Hey, happy Thursday, and welcome to today's edition of Daily Distinction. Really glad that you are here. I've been having some technical trouble here trying to make everything work. I've been moving computers and messing around. It never fails. If you do an update on a system when you don't have anything coming up, it goes perfectly. If you do an update on a system and you've got a deadline where you've got to use the equipment that you're updating, everything goes wrong. Why is that? It's the Peter principle of program updates. I was trying to alliterate there, program performance, whatever it is. Anyway, hey, Charles, great to see you. It is hot in San Jose today. We are having a pretty good day in Vegas. It's still in the 80s. It's 87 here right now, which is... I guess we got a heat wave that's coming, but we're not there yet. And by the way, Charles, I wanted to say thank you. Man, I tell you what, you share this show out there, and I am so grateful for that. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing that, and thanks to everybody that shares. Brian's another guy that shares. I appreciate that. You do that all the time, Brian, and it means the world, as does my friend Scott. So far, so good. Scott, I hope you're doing great. So good so far is a friend of mine titled the book, kind of flipping that around. I always thought that was cool. So glad that you're here today. We got a challenging topic to talk about today. It's one that a lot of times we don't want to face up to. I know I don't. And it's part of the reason I'm talking about it, because as we talk about it, then it gets a little bit more comfortable, and it's particularly challenging. And it's a conversation that we need to be having. When times change, what happens to our skills? Many years ago, when I was a national FFA officer, we went to Detroit, and we were there to thank General Motors, because as you might imagine, General Motors and all the Chevy and GMC trucks, they're big supporters of FFA. So we toured the factory, the main GM factory in Detroit. And there were so many people working there, and they were working 3 shifts. I mean, this is mid-70s, and as you can imagine, when it's that long ago and what the car business was like back then, and the American car still ruled the world, and they were pumping them out as quick as they could make them, and it was very human labor intensive. I'll bet you now, if you went to the GM plant, probably not the one in Detroit, other plants, it wouldn't even look like the same place because of robotics and because of all the different things that are going on, right? A robot puts the windshield on, not a human being, for example. So what happens to those skills? If your skill was that, what happens? It's interesting because we talk about how many people are going to lose their jobs when a situation changes, like when the computer revolution, whatever it might be. And then we look at the number of people that's employed, and it really doesn't change that much. What changes is what the people do, right? So it means that when times change, perhaps the need for our skills change. And so I wanted to talk about that just a little bit today, because I think that's a challenging question for all of us. Hey, I'm going through it. I don't know what your personal situation is. I mean, I know, Charles, in real estate. Real estate's certainly altered and changed in terms of how you can communicate with customers. If you were looking to buy a house in Hawaii, and let's say you're going to move from Las Vegas to Hawaii. Hey, there's one little problem. To go over and see the house, you first have to spend 2 weeks in quarantine. If you're a real estate agent in Hawaii, your skill of showing the house and presenting the house is probably going through a challenge right now, when people have to wait 2 weeks in quarantine before they can get out of the hotel room to go see a house, right? So it's changing. What happens to our skills? What do we do? And man, I'm telling you, I mean, I'm confronting this personally every day. I'm not complaining. It is what it is, right? But when you have spent most of your life working and developing the skill to be able to communicate to a live audience, and that is forbidden, totally unexpected, totally unpredicted, all of a sudden the skill that you have worked for decades doesn't work, doesn't apply. So what happens to our skills? What do we do? Hey, Mary Felix, great to see you. One of my favorite folks. Yeah, we got to change your skills right now. Aggressive learning, and we're going to get to that. That you got it. You're there. So I guess what I always hate using this word because it reminds me of the bad joke, about it depends. Oh, I didn't realize you're wearing diapers, right? It depends, right? What happens to your skills? It depends. First of all, it depends on what skills you have, right? Some of them may not change, but it also depends on how you view the future, how you view yourself, how you view. But what we have to do is to understand that we have to. Not only do we have to look at skills differently, but we have to be aware of how our customers and how our coworkers are looking at the situation, because that's changing too. Hey, Darcy. Yeah, there's not a hard and fast answer to that, is there? It's that we have to really analyze it and think about it. The answer is going to be different for all of us, but I think it's really important that we confront the question is, what happens? So it reminded me of something that happened in my life a long time ago. It's when I was living in Indianapolis, and my wife and I wake up. We had 2 dogs, Keisha and Pepper. And, mornings, they were always so excited, and how dogs are when you get up in the morning. And the dogs sometimes slept with us on the bed, or they would sleep on the chair in the master bedroom, or whatever. They were free to roam in the bedroom at night. So we wake up and Keisha's ready to go, and Pepper is dragging himself over to us. Now, his expression on his face didn't look like he was in pain, but his hind legs, he was just dragging them as he was using his front legs to drag over to us. He was paralyzed. We didn't know what had happened because he was fine when we went to bed, but evidently he had jumped off the bed or jumped off a chair or did something that caused a spinal problem, that he was paralyzed. His back legs were paralyzed. So, I'm trying to see, is he okay? Like, would he eat something? Would he drink water? Would he, as she's on the phone calling the vet, and the vet said, pinch his hind foot and see if he flinches, and he didn't, right? Which meant there was a spinal issue. And so we said, can we bring him in? And the vet said, no, let me make a call first. So he calls back and he says, there is a doctor here in Indianapolis, and he specializes in canine spinal surgery. Here's where I want you to go. He had an opening today, and if you're willing to do it, why, you can take him in today, because the sooner you do this, the better it is. The sooner okay. So we go in, and he wants us to wait a day and then do the surgery. He examined, and he said, let's let it settle down for a little bit, and then we'll do the surgery. So we had spinal surgery on our 3-year-old dog. And we get him back, and he's got staples all down his back and all that. But gosh, he had just such a great attitude. And the doctor went through this program with us, right? Fill the bathtub, put your dog in the tub, and then work his hind legs to keep it. And over a relatively short period of time, oh my gosh, he was good as new. I'll never forget coming back from a speech. And we had a place for the dogs in the kitchen, and we kept them in the kitchen, and particularly wanted to keep him there because you wanted to keep him still. And I opened up the garage door, the door from the garage to go in the kitchen, and Pepper stands up and starts wobbly, but walking to me. First time he'd walked. I choke up talking about it now, right? So we had spinal surgery for our dog, and it was a total success. Pepper lived to be 16. He lived 13 years after the spinal surgery, never had a bit of trouble after that. And you're thinking, what in the heck? Where are you going with this story? Okay, so The doctor was recognized as one of the world's leading experts on canine spinal surgery. Amazing skill. The proof is in the great life that our dog had for 13 years after the spinal surgery. So if you woke up tomorrow morning and you couldn't move your legs, would you go, man, that guy's got mad skills? Why don't I go to the vet? That sounds like a ridiculous question, doesn't it? Would you go, oh, it's exactly the same? I mean, a spine's a spine. I think I'll just let the vet operate on me because look at what he's done and how good he's been. The skills are the same, right? You probably wouldn't do that. And as much mad respect as I have for the skills of Pepper's surgeon, if my legs were paralyzed, I wouldn't go, well, the skills are the same. You know, it's not. I would want someone who had prepared for my situation at my time and currently on that. Does that make sense? Well, I think a lot of us look at what's going on and we think, well, you know, it's all the same. I mean, my skills will be fine in this changing time. There's nothing that's different. Come on. The skills that I have are exactly the skills I'm going to continue to need. Everything's the same. In other words, you're hoping that people will get spinal surgery from you, even though that hasn't been your complete specialty in the past, because times have changed and situations have changed and the world has changed and we got to change. And I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's comfortable. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but I am saying we have to think about it and we have to consider it. Pam, speaking of living in Indy, do you miss Eagle Creek? Yeah, that's when we lived over on that side of town. And that was one of the places after he got back and going again, we'd take Pepper and he would walk and run and everything. So it always brings back the memories of that when we were going through there. Charles talking about virtual showings. Big right now, may become the standard. Zoom, Facebook, FaceTime, new ways to converse with clients. We are still keeping our person time with clients minimal. And you know, I gotta tell you, I think that's one of the challenges right now, right? Is that some of us are realizing that if I could sit here and look at houses via Zoom, rather than looking at 7 or 8 houses, I might do it on a Zoom call and decide which one I like best, and then maybe just go confirm and see that one in person where I intend on buying. Changes the game a lot, doesn't it? Because Charles, now you're not just a realtor, you're a broadcaster. You got to figure out a way to communicate with a camera and create a program on camera like you did before, but yet it's a different skill. Everything that you've prepared for, and I'm using Charles in the example, but I think it works with all of us. Everything you've prepared for has been, how do I help a client? How do I help someone when I have a chance to show them the home? Because when I'm showing them the home, you know, if there's something about your kitchen that they really, really like, but there's other things about the house they don't like, then I can think, okay, I know that they love that, you know, like 2 ovens. So I can really make a point of that the next house I go to. But if you're not getting as much feedback because now you're doing it this way rather than in person, how do you, it's different skills, different things that we have to understand and that we have to focus on. So here's a like a 4-step process that I'd like for you to think about in terms of how do we keep our skills relevant in a changing time? And I'd like for you to begin again by looking at where you are now. Just make a list of the 5 most important skills that you have. And they're going to be different for everybody that's watching right now because we all are different. We all have different skills and we've all based our learning in different areas. But what are the 5 most important skills that you have right now? It might be how you communicate. It might be website design. It might be whatever it is. Make a list of your 5 best, most important skills. Okay. And after you have done that, next, what I'd like for you to do is honestly confront this question. How will the need for these skills change? What I'm going through in my business is, one of the skills I've tried to develop is to communicate with a live audience. How will the need for those skills change? It's changed incredibly dramatically. So I have to look at other skills in terms of communication and writing content and all of that and think about, okay, how's that? So notice what you're doing is you're identifying your 5 most important skills that you currently have. Then we're going to do an honest assessment and say, how will the need for these skills change? To go back to the General Motors example, if you were a factory worker and you saw robotics coming and you saw the what happened with Japanese cars coming over and taking over the market at a period of time, later in the late 70s, early 80s. If you would have done this analysis, you would have kind of gone, if my skill is working in the automotive factory, I better get ahead of the game and develop some new skills. Or I better figure out, what's happening here, as opposed to waiting around and wondering what happened when you seem to be replaced. There are several offerings to broaden our skills, like virtual presentations. But Darcy, part of that is the challenge is we have worked really hard to communicate with an audience and not with a camera. And that's part of what has to change, right? Because what my first speech coach, Ron Arden, used to talk about the importance of looking and getting every section of the audience involved as you were talking and as you were doing. Well, if I'm doing this right now, if I'm going from here to here, that's bad camera work. So I had to learn to develop a different skill, focusing on the one in the camera. We'll talk more about that in another program, but that's one of the challenges, is that the communication is still there and is still critical, but focusing on the camera as opposed to making certain that the entire audience that's just one example of a different skill. Well, John, there's your comment. How you doing, my friend? I hope you're good. Speaking of broadcasting and broadcasters, there's one of the best right there, my friend John. As the old HBO show used to say, John from Cincinnati, who is now John in Las Vegas. So we're going to ask, how will the need for these skills change? And another question we've got to ask is, are these skills still relevant in a post-pandemic world? Notice the question is not, do I want these skills to be relevant in a post-pandemic world? We've got to confront it and say, are these skills still relevant in the way the world is changing? And I will already tell you that's an anticipatory question. By that, I mean, it is a question that also requires you to kind of project, because there's still the unknown out there. You hear different opinions about, will there be a second wave of this? Different opinions about when will there be a vaccine? Different opinions about, I talk all the time with my buddies in Nashville that are in country music. They just kind of been put on the shelf. Tremendous skills. So what do? You find different ways to approach it. You find different ways to figure out where your skills are. Hey, Ann, always great seeing you. Thank you for being here. Hey, Carl, great to see you. I haven't seen you here before. And oh my gosh, what a great example. That is so on target. Look back in movie history and read about when movies transitioned from the silent film to what they called the talkies, and how many people's, the star performers' careers were decimated when it moved to the talkies. And there you go, Carl, you nailed it. It is the talent that didn't or couldn't make the shift, right? Because, and think about it too, Turner Classic Movies, TCM, every Sunday night, I think it is, because I watch it, I don't watch it on Sunday night, but they put a new one up every Sunday night. We'll have a silent movie night or a silent movie segment. So they post a silent movie. And so I was watching, what was the name of it? A silent movie from Germany, mostly silent. And in the silent movies, right? Because they weren't, you read a subtitle, but those were kind of few and far between. You learn through the action. So what these actors did was really be dramatic, and really over the top, and that didn't work when they were talking. It became a different, and what happened if they had a thick accent, right? We didn't hear Valentino's voice. Rudolph Valentino, one of the biggest movie stars of the silent era, we didn't, so they could have a very thick accent, or they could, have a speech impediment or whatever. And it didn't matter in the silent movies, but it mattered a lot when it became the talkies. So what a great example, Carl. Thank you. It's so true. John, there seems to be a significant difference in age groups. To folks below a certain age, the experience of connecting on a screen seems to be real enough. For older folks, real means in person. Yeah, exactly. And how do you bridge that? And John, that is the perfect setup, my friend, to what we need to do next. And that is let's review in case you just got in. After we made a list of the 5 most important skills that we have, then after we ask ourselves, how will the need for these skills change? And then ask ourselves honestly, directly, are these skills still relevant in a post-pandemic world? Our next step is to do what's called a gap analysis. Anticipating what skills are going to be critical against the evaluation we have of the skills that we currently possess. So where is the gap, right? I might know how to communicate, but my communication is based with a live audience, not a camera. I might know how to be great with showing homes, but now I got to show homes online instead of in person. I might be great at managing a workforce that I look out of my office and there they are. Now I got to learn the skills of managing a remote workforce. These are all things where we have to understand what's the gap between what we know and what we need to learn. Where are the gaps, honestly, between the skills that you have and the skills that you need in a changing world? Make a list of the 5 most important things you need to learn. What do you need to learn? Maybe you've studied management. Maybe you're terrific at managing your team, but now your team is working remotely. So part of what you need to learn are better skills of managing a remote workforce. Maybe you've been terrific in sales because you've been able to talk one-on-one with your customers in person, and your personality and the sales skills you've worked on, man, you're fantastic. But now you're selling online or over the phone. What do you need to learn in terms of technology? What do you need to learn in terms of presentation? What do you need to learn to make that happen? So make a list of the 5 most important things that you need to learn. And then find out where you can learn those. And as Nike says, just do it. There is such abundant information out there. When, to your point, Carl, when the movies changed from the silence to the talkies, there really weren't a whole lot of acting schools set up that people could go learn how to talk when they acted, especially in the medium of film. Because if you think about on the stage at that time, it was kind of the same as the silence. It was very dramatic and and it had to be pulled in for the intimacy of the camera, of the cinema. And there weren't really places they could go to learn that. Now, there is such an abundance of information out there. What we have to do is to go to this vast reservoir of knowledge and figure out where we need to go and what we need to do to make that happen. And it is there. It is available. Carl just did a 4-hour webinar with 300 people in 300 locations. Yeah, short attention spans, sound bites. Good. Glad to hear that, Carl. By the way, this is what I'm working on right now. We're preparing a educational program, a course on post-pandemic events. And we're going to be launching it next week. So I probably shouldn't be talking about it yet. Shelly's going to kill me. But shooting the video and everything now. And it's only for speakers and meeting planners. But it talks about the shift in terms of how we think about a meeting. Because it's just like the veterinarian that I talked about earlier, the canine surgeon. man, it worked for Pepper, great, but is that what would work for me if I needed something with my spine, right? So it's same basic skills, but yet the other aspects of it are so different, it's not really the same. So how we think has to be different. How we communicate has to be different. For a meeting professional, how do you coach your executives who before could walk on the stage and look at the teleprompter and go, hey, are they going to do that now? How does that all change? Where do they make the presentation from? How does it? So we're going to go through all of that. We did a survey of people that are going to be attending virtual meetings. And there were a couple things in that survey that were jaw-dropping, particularly for meeting professionals, some for speakers. In that, I'll give you one real quick. You're exactly right. The attention span is challenging. You know why? Because you watch this and it's more like television than it is like a meeting. And to go from talking head to talking head to talking head, you'll watch one person, but I was on a program that was based out of Dubai, and they thought, boy, we're just going to keep it going, right? Every speaker had 12 minutes. So they booked me to give a 12-minute talk. So I do my 12 minutes. And then the next speaker came along and did 12 minutes. And the next speaker came, and there was no congruency between, and it was just talking head after talking head. And turned out to be kind of a bad meeting. Not because the information was incorrect, not because the speakers weren't proficient, but because of the way that they thought about the meeting was incorrect. So, John, I think for folks like you and me that think in terms of broadcasters, that's a more important skill in what we do as meeting, as speakers than it's ever been. And I'm not just talking about for speakers, that same thread of how are our skills, how do we need to shift? And we're all, you bet, Carl, we're wrestling with what works best. So it's all a part of what we need to be thinking about and what we need to be learning and doing. So let me just review really quickly before we're completed for the day. And that is, when times change, what happens to our skills? And it depends what skills that you have, but nothing is exactly the same. So the way that we get better is to make a list of the 5 most important skills that we have and critically ask ourselves, how will the need for these skills change because of what we're going through in this post-pandemic marketplace? We even have to ask if the skills are still relevant in a post-pandemic world. And then our next step is just do a gap analysis between the skills that we have and the skills that we perceive that are going to be vital. Where is the gap? What do we need to learn? And be very specific and precise about it. What are the 5 most important things that you need to learn? Get online, figure out where you can learn it and do it, because as times change, the skills required of us change as well. Hey, I want to remind you our free resources are available at distinctionnation.com. If you haven't signed up, 14-day audio program that you can download. You listen to one segment every day for 2 weeks. By the end of the 2 weeks, you've got your priorities straight. You've learned how to make your priorities congruent with your goals and make the goals the guide to your daily activities. It's what you need to do individually to create personal distinction, to stand out. And that's available absolutely free. Other resources as well. It's all right there at Distinction Nation. By the way, I haven't mentioned for a long time, I've got a podcast as well. If you listen to podcasts, it's called Project Distinct. We're in reruns now of seasons 1 and 2. We're getting ready to launch season 3. Got a big announcement about something very cool that's going to be happening with a podcast that I'll be making maybe tomorrow, probably Monday. But we'll be starting season 3, but in a new, something new. So excited about that. So we'll tell you all about that. But check out Distinction Nation. Also, if you want, Distinction Radio is available. Just tell your device that you want to listen, say ALEXA. I'm saying that so yours doesn't go off. Play Distinction Radio, and you'll be able to listen to Distinction Radio on your Amazon device. So thanks, everybody, for taking time to watch today. It's my favorite half hour of the day, as I say every day. Thank you for sharing, because most of our viewers watch on replay. If you're a replay viewer, thank you for doing this. And I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow on Daily Distinction.